So we talked earlier about atmospheric perspective and the way things further away, like this mountain, take on the color of the atmosphere and they lose contrast. So let's do a little bit of the same to this secondary hill, which will help push it back in space more. So with that hill's 2 layers selected, I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correction, Tint, and I'm going to turn my sky on for a moment and sample the blue of the sky, and then we'll pull the amount to tint down to something like I think about 20 will be good. It's enough to give it enough separation from these hills, but these hills aren't so far away that it would have, you know, as much atmospheric perspective as the mountains in the distance. So just a little bit like that. That gives us kind of a nice in-between level. Now let's pan our mountains, and the mountains are very far away, so we don't want them panning too fast. First thing I'm going to do is just slide it over to a little bit more interesting mountain range, and let's move it up a little bit. Oop, not that high, about like that, so we can see more of the mountains. So click your stopwatch to set that first keyframe, then we'll go to the end of our comp. And we'll move our mountains this way a little bit, not too much. So there's a little bit of motion there, but it's definitely slower than the 2 layers in front of it. So we're starting to get a sense of depth now, created by this parallax. The one thing that's really tending to flatten the image out at this point is this bottom third of the screen. You can see this first hill in the ground feels very much like a flat panning 2D image, and the reason is we would expect some parallax to occur on the ground because the ground down here is closer to us. The ground up here near the base of this hill is much further away. There's probably, you know, who knows how, could be 300, 400, 500 yards. It's hard to tell out there out west. This could be a mile away. So we need the ground that's closer to us to pan faster. Now at first you might think that, well, the solution could be to cut this ground plane up into different strips and pan them at different speeds. And that would help a little bit, but you'd kind of see that the banding of the motion, and it would look too much like individual strips to be convincing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use a 2D distort effect to fake the 3D parallax on the ground. And so now you'll understand why we pre-comped the ground and we did the panning of the ground inside this pre-comp. Because now, back here in our desert animation, here's what we're going to do. With the ground layer selected, go up to Effect, Distort, Corner Pin. And corner pin is a nifty effect that it puts a, you can see it's represented by these little round circles. It puts gives you an upper left pin, upper right, lower left, lower right, and you can move these pins around to distort the layer. So you can fake perspective. And in this case, we're going to fake perspective by having the top pins closer together than the bottom pins. So I want to grab the bottom pins and pull them apart. It does kind of stretch and distort your layer a little bit, but you know, them's the sacrifices we've got to make. So now, since the top pins are closer together than the bottom pins, we're forcing these pixels along the bottom of the image to cover a much greater distance in the same amount of time. So these pixels are going to move faster, and then it's gradually going to fall off in perspective towards the top of the image. So let's render a RAM preview and see what that looks like. So it's there. You can see this little mossy thing is moving faster than this little mossy thing up here. It's still a little too subtle, so we can move these pins even further apart. If you can't find them, just come up here to the effects control and select the corner pin effect, and then you'll be able to see these little control points again. Okay, now that effect is a little more pronounced. So the further apart you stretch those, the more dramatic the change in parallax is going to be from the front to the back of this layer. This is enough that it should be pretty noticeable now, and it breaks that feeling that this is just a flat 2D image that's just panning by.